Peter, knowing that as soon as he finishes this race, he's got a couple more in different sorts of cars. He wants to be versatile to handle this sort of machinery. Look at the wide wheels of the rear-engine Porsche at the back there. They need that rubber to keep the car on the road with the sort of power that it has. And you can be sure that Peter will put in a big effort. He won an earlier race, so watch for good things from him. 76 is Neil Bryan in a Chevy Monza. The big engine cowl at the front suggests the motor has been left where it was made. He's in the left-hand drive model, of course, the American-built Chevy with a big engine there. His time was 52.4 in practice, whereas the best time, Bob Stevens, was 51.8, so there's a margin there of 0.6 of a second. And there's the Bryan Thompson. We'll call it a Mercedes-Benz, although it's got a few changes under the bonnet or under the roof.
Well, he's brought his car out onto pit road after chatting with Gary Wilkinson, and he is set to go. Bryan Thompson making his first appearance of the season here in that car. I would imagine would be quite a handful here at Amaroo Park, and would be more of a handful if the skies open here this afternoon.
Yes, it's made to look even longer than it is by the very low build. It looks like a bit like a breadboard on wheels. It's so low and flat. But it went pretty well the last time I saw it at Adelaide. He really has it cracking. The aerodynamic aids are curious. There are those air vents on the side to get the heat away from the brakes, and the big aerodynamic foil up top is to keep air pressure on top of the car rather than beneath it, to make sure the wheels stay on the ground. He'd have, I would think, something in the order of 500 horsepower to dispense with there. And the engine and transmission are under that curious-looking cowling there, very close to the driver. If anything goes wrong with the motor, Bryan Thompson will be the first to know.
It's broad and flattened up, almost looks like an aircraft carrier, doesn't it?
Might be timely to take a look.
I hope it handles better.
Yes, certainly. How they'll line up in the K&A Wunderlich Sports Sedan series. Round 3 here this afternoon at Amaroo Park.
Well, Bob Stevens has made pole position in the Monaro by a time of 51.8. Alongside him, John Burke in the Celica. He was 2/10 slower. On the second row, and the man to watch, I suggest, Peter Fitzgerald in the Porsche, with Neil Bryan alongside him in the Chevy Monza. Then Bryan Thompson in 5th place with the Mercedes. Bob Tyndall in the Tirana is alongside him. Russell Kramer, a driver we didn't see now run down pit road, in the Falcon. And then Graham Stones in a Mazda. Tony Herbert in an Escort, and Laurie Hazelden in his fierce V8 engine Capri. Joseph Said in a Fiat is next up, and Mal Rose in a Tirana. Gary Wilmington is next on the list in 13th spot, unlucky 13, and then there are another, oh, how many? 20, well, there are 25 altogether, let's leave it at that. So it's a big field for this 10-lap race in the K&A Wunderlich Sports Sedan series, and the action up front. Bryan Thompson, I might suggest, is probably the last of the drivers we could expect to see with a real winning chance, although Bob Tyndall went well in an earlier race, and Russell Kramer, going by in 35, always puts in a strong effort. They're now going out on their warm-up lap, just so that the drivers can see what the track looks like, and it is certain to be a little change after the incident which eliminated so many cars in the previous race. Well, one of the most interesting drivers in the race, certainly in the most interesting car, is the Victorian veteran Bryan Thompson, running this time in the special Mercedes. There's his background. As you can see, some of the top drivers aren't exactly chickens, but it's experience as well as skill which counts, and Bryan Thompson's been around for a long time. He's driven overseas, as you can see. He's had experience at Bathurst, and he's still driving with great flair. Bryan Thompson in the Mercedes, which he's taken over, another driver having initially developed it. It doesn't have too many Mercedes-Benz parts around it, but it's certain to stir the heart of any person who loves the three-pointer star. There it is. Not the sort of Mercedes you expect to see waiting outside the school to pick up the
very affluent school.
Well, it'd be a quick school, wouldn't it?
Well, the two men, of course, that have dominated the K&A Wunderlich series so far have been Bob Stevens and Peter Fitzgerald. John Burke has been in there, and so too has Bob Tyndall. So I think Bryan is in for a fiery Amaroo initiation here today.
Stevens leads the series with 15 points. It's still wide open, though. Burke's got 9 and Fitzgerald 6, as has Laurie Hazelden in the Capri, which is starting from 10th position on the grid, the 5th row. It'll be a big field, though, almost back to Wunderlich corner.
Well, Burke, of course, has had that Celica turbocharged this year, and that's made a lot of difference to him. Last year, this series was basically Fitzgerald versus Stevens, but Burke is right in amongst it in the series now, standing second on the point score. And as you pointed out, Evan, with the advent of Bryan Thompson in that big Mercedes, that's just added yet another dimension to the Comalco Wunderlich series here at Amaroo Park. This should be a great race.
Burke didn't make a good start in the preliminary, and it's a rather frightening prospect to know you've got so many big, fast cars behind. If you don't get off the line quickly, you can be sure he'll try hard. There's one of the big, fast cars, Neil Bryan in the Chevy Monza. Not much clearance under the car. These big spoilers at the front designed to keep air out and to shovel air where it's needed. Cool the brakes, to cool the radiator. Peter Fitzgerald, he makes demon starts. I've never seen a driver who is so consistently quick off the line. And the Porsche will certainly suit that characteristic. And if he can get a good start and wedge his way between Bob Stevens and John Burke, well, he well and truly is in the hunt. 30 seconds to go. But alongside him, of course, Neil Bryan in the Chevy Monza can be expected to go quickly too. The Chevy gets its power down, and how'd you like to be the last man in the pack? That's Allan Taylor, I think, in a Tirana, looking at all that field up in front. You're thinking,
You'd have to be optimistic.
yes, well, I mightn't win this one, but I'll see what goes on.
Not far away from the flag going up. About a few seconds away from the start. And just look at the view as they get away and go racing in round 3 when a lightning start from Fitzgerald on the inside, and Thompson trying to following up as they head up with Bob Stevens on the inside. But I think Fitzgerald, no, Stevens hangs on.
Fitzgerald had the start. Stevens muscled his way past them into the corner. That was pretty dynamic driving. Bryan's up there in third spot, going a very good line inside, and the field pouring through on the first of 10 laps.
Coming down towards Mazda corner, and it's the Amaroo specialist, Bob Stevens, in front. The Victorian challenger is Peter Fitzgerald in the Stanlite Porsche, and Neil Bryan up in the Monza into third spot, followed by Thompson.
Thompson's done well, hasn't he, to get up so well in these early laps in a big car.
Racing down towards the lake corner, and the pressure certainly on Stevens here for the first time.
John Burke off the front row of the grid's been shuffled back to 5th position in 1 lap.
Stevens will lead across the line. There's the field coming through as they go over the start-finishing line now, so they're 1 down. Thompson making his move on Bryan, and Stevens, if anything, increasing his lead. Here's Thompson up on the inside of Bryan, but still Stevens there. Open up marginally that time on Peter Fitzgerald. Then Neil Bryan in car number 76, the Chevrolet Monza. Bryan Thompson in the Mercedes Chev.
Well, Thompson doing everything but passing Bryan. There he goes. He says, that'll do me. You show me the road I'm going. And he went. That was like an arrow being shot out of a bow, and didn't he go? My heavens, Thompson is quick. He is worth watching. He's got that non-typical Mercedes really flying. That was dynamic driving the way he disposed of Bryan. He's made already 2 car lengths on the leaders who are locked in combat. In on the inside, that's up in front by their Porsche trying. I don't know whether he can get through. He said, that'll do me too.
Oh, Thompson's through as well.
Poor old Bob. There he is. Look at this. How's that for getting into the lead? And Bryan Thompson is in front, and the other Stevens is gone. Stevens came around the corner. He's out of control on the grass, spinning his car around.
He's okay. There's the rest of the field going beneath as we pick up one of the slower cars about to be lapped by Bryan Thompson.
Well,
The Shepparton driver having his first outing in the Chevy Mercedes here at Amaroo Park, and he has hung them out to dry.
Bob Stevens is back on the track, but at the rear of the field.
and I'm trying to think, when was the last time we saw a Mercedes-Benz leading a race at Amaroo Park? I can't recall ever.
The vintage and
Maybe.
historic day, perhaps.
Well, 2 lightning passing manoeuvres on the 1 lap, and Thompson's in front.
When he plants the foot, you wouldn't want to be standing in front of him.
No.
No, I wouldn't like to be crossing a road if he was coming around, and here's Peter Fitzgerald closing up. He said, how did you get by? I was watching what was going on behind, and you came from nowhere.
Back across the line again, and it's Bryan Thompson, the 2 Victorians. Thompson over Fitzgerald across the line again, and this is where the Chevy Mercedes goes up over the top of the hill and starts to open up. There's the gap, first to second, and then a fairway back then to Neil Bryan in third place. Stevens is going again, but still back in the pack as Bryan takes one of the slower cars, number 44, and that's Mal Rose in the Tirana as they come down towards Mazda corner. There's one that's not going to make it, 747.
Yes, he's had a jumbo-sized problem. Graham
grounded.
Nolan. Yes, Graham Nolan has parked the car.
No, he's on his way again. No sooner said than done.
He just lodged the flight plan, and he's off.
Neil Bryan.
That's a good-looking car, isn't it? If you like the exotic shapes that appear in sports sedans. An American design, the big Chevy V8, a real shark nose there. And Bryan running where? In third place.
Yes, John Burke in the Turbo Celica is just behind Bryan, about 3 or 4 car lengths. He's the man that came off the front of the grid and whose car is not running as well at this meeting as we've seen it previously. There he is.
He's
he's under a little pressure himself. That's 77 going through, John Burke.
Again, not your average shopping Celica, just like the Mercedes is not a true representative of the breed. The Burke Celica has been fairly well fiddled with. But as you were saying, Gary, not going as well at this meeting as we've seen in the past. 2 slow starts, which have cost him dearly, because you get behind in this sort of business, and it takes a lot of catching up.
They take the right-hand corner in at the lake in 4th spot. Neil Bryan up ahead of him, and of course the leading pair, Bryan Thompson in the Mercedes and John Fitzgerald in the Porsche.
They're heading up Bitchapay Hill once again as we pick up on the leaders, just going through into Dunlop Loop, and there's the gap back to 3rd with Neil Bryan. Car number 76, Burke back a spot behind him in 4th, and Stephen still trying to make up the ground he lost, and he went out into the Toolies near the lake. There's Peter Fitzgerald. Thompson's a little ragged coming out of that corner.
Yes, Thompson's learned his way around the track. Now he's trying some other parts.
Well, Fitzgerald closes up from here to the... Fitzgerald a little sideways that time, but has been closing dramatically coming down to the lake corner. That's probably the biggest gap that Thompson's had over Fitzgerald. Just look at the 17 machine as it comes up to Wunderlich corner again, and we'll follow him up the front straight here at Amaroo Park. So close to the ground.
This car has ferocious pace up the straight, and that's where he pulls away from the Porsche. Really flies up the top of the hill. A dab of the brake, not too much of it. Comes over the top. He's got a Mazda in front of him. They'll have to pass on a tricky part of the track, because that driver's got his hands full. Thompson comes sweeping round. He takes good lines. You can tell the experience of the driver there. He's soon learned this track. And he really has opened up for himself a fairly considerable margin over Peter Fitzgerald.
A great campaigner, Evan. Bryan Thompson, been around the sport for a long time.
He's gained an enormous amount of experience, and that's something that Peter Fitzgerald is gaining in great lumps, not by dint of the years he's been racing, but the number of races he contests. He's in at least, 3 different categories of racing in this meeting, in the Stallion Stables Goodyear Series, and also running in the
Super Series,
where he is a leader.
The Sports Sedans.
That's a fair bag of tricks for a driver. It's pretty hard work. They say that Amaroo is the most difficult race circuit in Australia from a driver's point of view. Many of them like it because there's a challenge every half second, but there is absolutely nowhere to race, even at Mount Panorama, probably the most testing track in Australia. You do get the chance to rest on some of the straights. There are no long straights here.
Well, I mean, they must like it, because Bryan Thompson's another one that's got his hands full driving in several categories today, and there are several other drivers competing in both open wheelers and sports sedans.
And look at the way Fitzgerald is just chucking that Porsche around. Picking it up by the scruff of the neck and throwing it into the bends.
I was going to say, if he hasn't got a tyre going off, he will have shortly.
I was wondering, in fact, whether his tyres were starting to go because of the way the tyre was wagging, and maybe he's just come to terms with the fact that he's using a lot of, putting a lot of energy through the rubber, which can cause the tyres to go off. 2 laps to go. 2 laps to go. I don't know whether he can do it. He's driving desperately hard. There's no greater trier in motor racing at the moment than Fitzgerald. But I think that Thompson, who started from 5th spot on the grid, has this race in the bag. He's going to slip nicely in front. First time out here in the big Mercedes, and he's doing everything right. Here he comes. He's got a slower car to pass. He just lapped another one, which Fitzgerald has to get by.
It's quite a gap now, isn't it, between Thompson and Fitzgerald. The last lap and a half of 2 laps, Thompson really has opened out a pretty fair lead. Fitzgerald's car, as Evan observed, perhaps not handling quite as well as it might, indicating that maybe the tyres are going off. Thompson appears to be having no such troubles. The broad, flat wedge, this futuristic-looking Mercedes, eating up Bitchapay Hill, and over the top with 1 to go.
This is certainly going to throw the whole series much more open, with Thompson, who hasn't got points, presumably going to collect maximum points, with the leader, Bob Stevens, out of the race. John Burke will get minor points. Peter Fitzgerald will add to them. We'll end up with a number of drivers very close together, and Thompson suddenly in contention. So it does make for interesting racing a little later on, and just behind Thompson, still Fitzgerald throwing that Porsche around, but unable to do much about closing the margin on this man, Bryan Thompson, the veteran, running here for the first time in the Mercedes-Benz, and only 1 more corner, 1 lick to go round before he wins this heat of the K&A Engineering Sports Sedan Series. Well, a great win to Bryan Thompson. He'll be pleased about that, Gary Wilkinson.
Yes, big effort. First time out at Amaroo in this car, which, as we said, is a handful indeed. And he's mastered the circuit and mastered the opposition to take the checkered flag, with Peter Fitzgerald taking second place. And Neil Bryan did well. He circulated without ever threatening the leading division and managed to hold off the challenges of John Burke in the Celica right throughout. And it's panned out that way. Bryan Thompson first, Peter Fitzgerald second, and Neil Bryan third in the Comalco Wunderlich Sports Sedan Series round 3 here at Amaroo Park.
Sorry, Gary. The man who must be kicking himself, obviously, is Bob Stevens, who led the series, but and was running strongly in this race. As you can see, Thompson had gone through to take over the lead. Fitzgerald already hung Stevens out on the wall to dry, and Stevens, coming out of Comalco Corner, goes off on the grass and out of contention. Tried to fight his way back through the field, but unfortunately it was Thompson who stayed out in front to beat home Fitzgerald and Neil Bryan in third place.